Um, we're now ready to go to the next talk. So we're going to be talking with Ruben from Protocol Labs, and he's going to give us some insights into how to create a great pitch for an accelerator. Hi, Ruben, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well. How about you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Perfect.
Ruben, welcome. I appreciate you taking the time to join us here today. I'm not gonna waste anyone's time more by keep talking, so I'll pass on the floor to you.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to be set up quickly sharing my screen. How's everyone doing? Can I get some raised hands? Everyone doing well? Excellent. All right. So, Carlos, can you quickly confirm that the slideshow is displaying?
Yes, you can see it fine.
Cool. So today we're going to be talking about how to write a great pitch. And writing a great pitch is very much a skill you are going to need across your entrepreneurial journey. It is something that you will need when you want to enter a grant program, but also accelerators or doing fundraising. So essentially for everyone on your team, be it the developers or the business-facing roles, there are elements in this particular talk I'm going to be giving that are recurring and that are part of the kind of key skill set that you will need to develop as a founder. So with this, let's quickly do a round of kind of introduction of who I am and why I can speak with like a little bit of authority to this. So I myself was involved with a number of companies. I started out with Rocket Internet, which is one of the larger VCs in Europe. Carlos will know them from, I guess, a number of deals. I then joined a portfolio company, Delivery Hero, where I was involved in mergers and acquisitions, but also in just the deal from the Rocket side. And then after that, I joined the venture arm of BCG, where we also did a lot of pitching when it came to kind of selling projects or even securing funding for our projects. And the last one being Pumpkin, which currently is at 100 million recurrent annual revenue, where we also did a significant amount of pitching to VCs and also huge veterinarian organizations. So pitching is something that is going to be with you throughout your journey. So let's kind of double click on what it means to deliver a great pitch, in particular in this kind of venture-backed setting, and look at the individual elements. To me, there are a number of ways of cutting it. There's a very famous methodology that cuts it into like viability, feasibility, desirability. I think for this particular group, where we have a lot of first-time founders, I'm going to double click a little bit deeper and like simplify it a little bit more so it becomes slightly more haptic. And I try to kind of formulate it from a entrepreneur's perspective, so not from a VC's perspective. So the key elements that you will need to run through, and I strongly suggest you do it in this order. There are other ways of doing it. And as you kind of improve on your skill set of crafting narratives, you can play around with these. But this is a kind of battle-tested approach. It's kind of like a very, very simple way of doing it. Right? So you start with the friction. You start with why people in the audience should even care about what you're doing. You then move into the solution. So you directly, once you have created this urgency around why what you're doing is important, you come up with a solution. And there are a couple of parts to the solution that your audience, in particular the VCs in the rooms, the investors, would want to hear. After that, your job is to increase the confidence in the audience that you can execute against the solution. And there are a couple of parts to it. The first part is to show how you execute, or how we as founders will execute against the solution. Then how what we build will create value. This touches on, your business case, your business model, how you address the different stakeholders. And then the last one, and often the most important one, and I know Carlos is very much kind of like a fan of this is, why are you the best team to deliver against this? But I'm going to break out all of these. Are there any questions in the audience at this point? Otherwise, I'm just gonna jump right into it. Cool. All right. So a couple of things on the friction and what it is that you are trying to do initially, right? Initially, you want to answer the question of why. Why should people care about what you're saying? And you should be very cognizant of your audience. Often you're pitching to people like me or people like Lucas, who are confronted with hundreds of pitches on a weekly basis, right? So there's a little bit of a pessimistic spin on this, whereby I would say if you don't catch our attention in the first 15 to 30 seconds, it is going to be hard to get that attention back, right? So start strong, start from the user perspective, and start with the why. Why should we care? Why is this why is this a huge program? Why is this a huge problem that needs addressing? And why should I personally care? Be it from a monetary financial returns perspective, be it from maybe I'm an impact investor, maybe this is very much aligned with the strategic vision of the fund I'm investing from. Make sure that your audience starts caring about the why, right? And once you have done that, and you see the initial light in the eye of the audience, substantiate it, right? It's like a 1-2 punch. Yeah, you go in, you capture their attention, and then you actually substantiate and make sure that it doesn't just feel like an assumption. It feels like something that is actually grounded in data, right? So if you're talking about we should care about global warming, you could draft timelines, right? You could draft timelines as to why I should care. You should tell me what the reduction in carbon emission should be for me to care and for me to believe that your solution or your friction is something that I should care about. Lastly, drastically simplify, right? Don't overestimate the sophistication of your audience. And what I mean by that, and I'm right now in Denver, at ETH Denver, and again, yesterday I was at an investors dinner, and there were a couple of really high-profile startups around. However, some of the pitches were way too technical and unnecessarily so. And often, someone from the team will come around, will drastically simplify, and then it will click. And remember, what you're trying to do is not convey to me how technically sophisticated your solution is, but what you really want to do is you want to bring the message across as to why I should care. So simplify as much as possible and test run the simplification with people, in your immediate circle that might not be as technical as you. If you can explain it in simple words to your grandma or someone from your college, and then you are on the right path. So much about friction. There are a couple of things that I would like to briefly highlight because I have experienced them too often, and I want to warn you of it. Currently, in particular in Web3, we are kind of in this paradigm where the technology enables us to do a lot of things that just weren't able before. We weren't able to do technologically before. This brings with it a temptation to just build something because it is possible. This is interesting, especially for engineers who are drawn to interesting problems. This might be a temptation, but I would warn you not to fall for that, right? Don't build something just because it's possible. Build something because there is a real friction. And that friction should have a number of qualities and characteristics, right? One, it should be real. So I spoke to this just now, like provide the data. Secondly, it should be sizable, right? So when you speak to your addressable market or when you speak to the people affected by this friction, yeah. So let's take Uber, right? There's a sizable number of people in the United States that want to get from A to B. Tell me how many people these are, right? And then show me that this friction that they're experiencing, hey, it's difficult to haul a car from downtown San Francisco to uptown San Francisco. Show me that this friction is recurring, right? It shouldn't be a one-off friction, maybe just related to this specific unicorn moment of COVID. No, I want this friction to be recurring in the next 5, 10, 20 years, depending on, you know, the longevity of my fund. I hope this makes sense. Any questions in the audience, particularly on friction? Carlos, can you monitor the chat for me, just in case?
I've been looking at the questions. I'll let you know if there's any. No worries.
Okay. All right. So let's take a step back and see where we are right now. Okay. So you've just entered the room. You have delivered a killer delivery around your friction. Carlos's eyes are now bulging. He totally gets why you're doing what you're doing. The friction is real. You have the audience on your side, and we are kind of now on this common journey of addressing this friction. Now you need to deliver a solution that I kind of.
Ruben, there's a couple of questions on friction actually.
Yes.
So could you please share some examples on friction and how we put that in 1 to 2 lines, perhaps from a few winning pitches?
From a few winning pitches. Okay. So, and let's take a Web3 example. There's one company that I personally really love. They're called Heat. And basically what they are doing is they're an NFT play, and they're associated with Friends with Benefits and the Metaverse group within Friends with Benefits. And what they are doing is they are building in an expression layer across metaverses, right? So what they're doing is there are these like separate metaverse platforms. You know, you have VR chat, you have you have functional land, you have sandbox, and what they're doing is they are making it possible that you can have a motion capture, like maybe a dance or a certain expression, right, or a particular thing, right, in a particular emote that you can take from one metaverse experience to another metaverse experience, right? And the way they kind of substantiated that the friction is real is they ran a couple of surveys within, you know, as an example, the Bored Ape Yacht Club community, but also a community that I'm a part of, which is called Pool Suite. And they substantiated that, hey, we would actually like metaverse agnostic expressions that we could bring into these metaverse experiences to kind of identify or show each other our common identity as parts of this Bored Ape Yacht Club or Friends with Benefits community, right? So that would be a friction. So the friction would be, I am friction. I, as a metaverse user, am currently not able to take the emotes from one metaverse experience into another metaverse experience. This is a recurring friction that I'm experiencing, that I'm experiencing every day, and it's something that lives across metaverse experiences. So does that kind of answer that particular question? I sadly can only see the panelists, so I can't see if you are giving me like a thumbs up or not.
We got an excellent, thank you.
All right. Are there more questions on friction? I think it's super important. I think the friction part, if we spend 50% of our time on friction, then I'm happy. But yeah, is there maybe another question here? Cool. So feel free to also ask the questions later. I'll now move forward to solution. So again, Carlos's eyes are glowing. Now we move into the solution stage, and we are now kind of like shifting gears from talking about the macro into the micro, right? So now you are starting to talk about your particular business, right? And your business features a number of pieces. It features a product. It features kind of like a go-to-market and a strategy and a team, right? That's associated with it. However, before you go into the nitty-gritty, right, make sure that you are laying out two particular pieces and make sure they stick, right? The one thing that you want to do is you want to lay out the vision of where you want to go. Why is this important? So now in Carlos's mind, the friction is real. You want to create as big image or a mental model of what your solution could be in 5 to 10 years, right? So I refer to this here, the vision, as the ultimate, largest end state version of what you are building, right? So that is one piece that you want to get across. Get across to the Carloses and the investors in the room how far this could go, because this is where the money is, right? Like venture capital by default is risk capital. A number of the companies will fail. You will want at least one blockbuster in your fund, and that blockbuster, the vision of this blockbuster, should be big enough to return the entire fund. Yeah. So as an example, put an example down here. You probably recognize what company this is associated with, but the vision here would have been to become the largest e-commerce platform on the planet, right? So that is a mission here. However, the mission is very far away, and it's helpful to talk about it. It's helpful to like instill that in the mind of the investor. However, you also need to talk about your mission, right? Like, what is it that you do to wake up every day, you as a team, right? An example of, again, Amazon, like the kind of the matching mission to the vision is to provide seamless direct-to-consumer experiences, right? On a daily basis, you cannot focus on becoming the largest e-commerce platform on the planet. That is not kind of a goal-directed piece that works as a heuristic to plan activity. Mission, however, is something you can get excited about every day. At Pumpkin, as an example, which is the pet insurance company that I built like 2 or 3 years ago, our mission was to allow caregivers to provide the best care for their pets, right? And this is something that, we're sitting in the office, we're looking each other in the eye as a management team, and we know that this is something that we're excited about, right? A classic case, very generic case of Web3, that you hear quite a lot, is like empower artists to be able, to own the value they are generating, right? Like a lot of NFT marketplaces are positioning themselves in that way. So that's their mission. Cool. So that's kind of like how you start speaking about your solution. Do we have questions in the audience? Cool. All right. So once you have kind of touched on what your solution is, you will now need to kind of shift gears into a more granular piece or into a more granular conversation on how you actually bring this mission and this vision to life, right? Rome was not built in a day, and in the VC's heads and in the heads of people like me, there's like a bullshit detector, right? And this bullshit detector is what you kind of try to disable, right? And we call this kind of like active de-risking, and we de-risk a couple of ways, right? And I'm going to go through these steps in a minute with you, but everything that is kind of following from here on out is to bolster the confidence of the audience in your ability to deliver on the vision you have positioned as your solution. I hope this makes sense. All right. So what you should start with after you spoke about your solution is to speak about how you will execute, how we as a founding team will execute against that solution. And there are two kind of industry standard ways and pieces that you would expect as part of the pitch that you would need to speak to, right? And one of them is kind of like an initial product roadmap, and I'm consciously saying initial product roadmap. And the second piece is the go-to-market, right? And let's unpack this a little bit. So when I say initial product roadmap, I am not referring to the piece that an application like Jira or Monday or any of these productivity and agile tools will generate for you, right? They produce these like very detailed sprint-based product roadmaps that have a really, really high grain of detail. No, this is not what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about an initial product roadmap, I am talking about you honing in on what your product is after 3 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, right? Give an idea to your audience on how you will transition step by step into the vision that you have outlined against the solution. Yeah? And this is a very important piece. This is where you demonstrate to your audience that you have a plan. And what you are trying to do is you are trying to, from a product perspective, right, from what you are building, that you have a plan on how to get from A to Z while going A, B, C, D. And these individual steps, these individual kind of bite-sized pieces, today to 3 months, 3 months to 1 year, should be digestible, and they should be believable given the team that you have kind of budgeted against the effort. So I think what could be helpful is me, after this talk, maybe sanitizing a couple of roadmaps, like initial product roadmaps that I've seen, and providing you like a little bit of an idea of what I'm going for, because I don't want you to, and I'm laying this out here, provide unrealistic detail. And I think this is something that you should definitely stay away from, right? Like people get very skeptical if you have planned out a 5-year plan very narrowly. And I think it always comes different than you have planned. However, again, what you're trying here is to convey confidence in your ability to provide tactical steps towards your vision. So once you have done that initial product roadmap, that is product, right? You also want to double click on how you activate this, how you go to market, right? Like how you bring this product that you're building, left side, to the market and to the user, right? And this go to market is more of an is more art than it is a craft, right? So this touches on your execution ability. This touches on often how experienced you are. But what you want to demonstrate here is that you have a plan on how to acquire users and how to acquire users effectively. And in going to market, you will make a number of key decisions of where to start. What am I talking about here? Let's talk about HeatDAO again. I think this, the product I was just talking about with the emotes across metaverses. What we were facing in kind of like a board meeting yesterday was we were talking about a number of avenues for go-to-market. There are a number of ways we could go to market. We can do a marketplace, and we can advertise what we are doing directly to users. We can also go and do like a B2B to C play, whereby we acquire the metaverses, the individual metaverse kind of outlays, and have them then advertise the strategic partnership with us. Or we go via the communities, the Bored Yard clubs, et cetera, and work with them, and then use them as multipliers for our outreach. So these are kind of like the avenues that you have and the conversations that you have internally. And often it helps to kind of outline the individual choices that you have in like activating what you want to do. And then showing why you chose for one or two or all of them, or maybe, you know, first this one, then a tiered approach, then you switch into this one. And then once this is built on a product roadmap, you're switching into number 3, right? So this go-to-market, this sequential piece on how you are going to conquer the world, right? That instills a lot of confidence if you can craft a narrative that Carlos and I and Lucas can follow. Does that make sense to this audience? I would love to get some questions on this.
Ruben, we do have a question.
Yeah.
So the question is, for the go-to-market, what is a good way to start? Focus on local markets or international also, if it works, and considering some geographies are still catching up on blockchain, NFTs, etc. And also, is it okay to mention that via the acceleration program, we expect to be able to unlock new markets and partnerships?
Yeah, absolutely. So, maybe to the latter one, right? Like, so a geographic rollout can make a lot of sense, you know, and in particular, you know, given that, you know, some teams will have idiosyncrasies. As an example, you might have an offering that is already quite established in the United States, and then you kind of have an offering that is de-risked on the business model piece, right? So you're looking into the United States, there's something that in the English market is already very established. And now you are a Spanish speaker or you are a Chinese speaker and you're like, hey, I can take this from a business model perspective and I can culturally craft this to my particular culture, the culture that I know, the language room and the echo chambers that I know, the DAOs, etc., that I know in China or let's say in Brazil, and then go to market there, right? And this is something that, you know, we at Rocket Internet, as an example, have done to huge success, right? We have built many billion-dollar companies, basically doing a geographic kind of arbitrage play. So that absolutely makes a lot of sense. So the classic pieces, just to take like a step back and think about approaches, like often you see a geographic go-to-market where people are say, hey, we start, you know, on the East Coast and then we move into the West Coast, and so on and so forth. Another approach would be to tackle different verticals. So saying, let's say you are a payroll provider, and then you say, hey, so we are going to be starting with B2B integrations with the huge benefit services like ADP and so on and so forth. And then later we move into direct consumer offerings and then roll out our mobile application, right? So, or you vertically move into like telecommunications, or you move into farming, right? Like whatever vertical makes sense, what you need to just give back to the audience is how you go about it. Did I address all pieces of this particular question? I think there was something around mentioning that you were part of an accelerator.
So yeah, part of the question was, is it okay to mention that via the acceleration program, we expect to be able to unlock new markets and partnerships?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely mention it. I think, you know, as first-time founders in particular, it is a great kind of rite of passage, and it makes a lot of sense for you to communicate that you were part of an accelerator, and like feel free to put like Protocol Labs and the Faber name, you know, next to it and say, hey, I'm a proud alumni of this accelerator, and I took a lot, you know, from the acceleration. So absolutely mention it. Yeah, absolutely. Quick time check. How much time do I have left?
You're good. You have 15 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, cool. So the next piece is, no, 2 steps back. So now you've shown how you want to execute on the product side and on the business side with go-to-market and your product roadmap. Now, the next piece that, founders often neglect, and I find this very surprising, is what is your business model? How will whatever you are going to do provide value, right? And I do understand that there might be, elements in this audience that don't have a direct profit motive. So you might be building in the impact space, so your KPIs might be different, but you still want to provide value. And how you provide value, the value story, is something that you need to be able to communicate clearly. And the way of doing this, to me, the best way of doing it, I'm a visual thinker, but I can assure you that many of my peers will agree, is boxes and arrows. Go for boxes and arrows. And you want to do two pieces here. Yeah? You want to address two key questions. Number one is, your business will touch on a number of stakeholders, right? So let's say, to make it simple, maybe I provide a hard example, a Web3 example, and a simple Web2 example. Let's start with the simple Web2 example. Uber, right? They are stakeholders in the Uber ecosystem. They are drivers. They are people that are hailing rides. They are operators. They are, they are these, the operators that are basically kind of like a B2B function that manage multiple drivers, right? You potentially have seen it, that like whenever you hail an Uber, it says, this Uber rider is actually part of another company that is LLTD, right? Like another stakeholder, right? Like a function that is focused on basically collaborating with Uber to do rides, right? And then you have Uber themselves, right? When you come into these conversations, you should clearly have figured out what is in it for these individual stakeholders. You should be able, if I press you, so we go to the Q&A now, you're standing there presenting, and I'm asking you, why should I, as an Uber driver, participate in it, right? Your answer should be, I'll make it easy for you. I make the process of getting riders easy for you, and what is in it for you? Money, right? What's in it for Uber? Well, Uber takes a cut, right? Like, so these questions, that's basically a table. Find out who the stakeholders are in the process, do your research, and make sure you have a strong answer as to what is in it for them. Just assume that every stakeholder in this particular kind of mechanism is going to be extremely rational, right? And they might not be rational, later on, or you will find out that they might be slightly, differently incentivized, particularly when other ride-hailing companies like Lyft come in and there's competition, but you should have nailed the basics. Yeah, and it's very similar in Web3. Web3 is kind of like, at least to me, it's kind of like the masterclass of incentive design, right? You need to create, like, foundationally Bitcoin, but also, the Filecoin economy, Ethereum, they are systems that have mastered how incentives are distributed across different stakeholders. The validators, or the miners, the people that are participating and submitting their submissions, and even the retrieval miners in the Filecoin ecosystem, the people that are participating in DeFi, and storage providers, and so on and so forth, right? Like, what Juan and their team have built, in essence, is a working incentive mechanism that in itself satisfies the needs of the individual stakeholders. Cool. So once you have kind of solved for the stakeholder mapping, and solved what is in it for me, for every stakeholder, you also want to just provide a really, really simple flowchart of how it works, right? Don't assume that at this point, we in the audience have got it, right? Like make it extremely easy for us to get it, right? So as in Airbnb, you can go to a website. On the website, you can filter for a home, and so on and so forth. Make it easy. Boxes and arrows show who is getting what, when, why. I can't stress this enough, and I'm always surprised when I get a presentation that doesn't feature this. I hope I landed this right now, but this flowchart I very much like to see. In particular, you have to assume that the person you are speaking with from a VC perspective, the people in the room, are not the ultimate audience. Often, they will take your pitch away, they'll take it and they go to someone else, and then they will have to relay your message to someone else. And having a flowchart like that will help them remember what it is that you're building and will help them communicate what it is that you're building. And they can then do your work for you in pitching it to maybe the principal that has the ultimate investment decision, or maybe other people in the syndicate that they want to also invest into your company. Other questions in the audience? Excellent. Nikki, no questions? Cool. Boxes and arrows, guys. Boxes and arrows. Powerful. Cool. Then lastly, on team. So I would always recommend you to close on team. At the end of the day, you might at this point be, your audience might at this point be in a, in a state whereby, they have their bullshit detector. They think, hey, what you're doing is interesting, but actually, if I were to go about it, I would do it slightly differently. I think the product roadmap is slightly unrealistic and the budgets are not quite right. And the go-to-market is, I would start on the West Coast and not on the East Coast, or I would build it on Polygon and not on Ethereum, or whatnot, right? The team slide can flip it. The team slide can make sure that what is a decision on the fence becomes, a buy-in or a buyout. Don't underestimate the power of, introducing your team, because VCs know, investors know, and protocols know that it will come different, and there will be pivots and iterations to your product. The question is, do you have the right team to deal with the uncertainty that comes with it? Do you have the right experience there? Are there experienced founders, right? Do you have the exact skill sets that are needed? And the way we kind of think about it is like this. And this is what I would like you to take away. Not as much the individual kind of pieces of the Venn diagram, but the idea of your audience thinking about you like a Venn diagram that has to cover a certain problem space. What do I mean by that, right? When we look at a team and you have instilled within us a vision of what you want to build and how you want to do it, we are now matching this to the skills that we are seeing in this room. You have given us a plan, you have given us a fight that we, a journey that we can like depart on together. Now I'm looking at you and I'm like, do I pick you as the team I want to go on this journey with, right? And there are a number of things I obviously want to have covered, right? If you talk to me about, hey, I want to build this DAO tooling stack that, integrates with, 50 applications within 3 months, and we have the best engineering team. I want to see this reflected. I want to see this reflected on your team slide. I want to see that you have shipped in the past. I want to see the velocities, the teams, the people that you have built alongside with. And I want to see that this engineering activity is somehow managed on the product side. So ideally, I'm seeing a strong product manager that can point to a portfolio of product that he or she has built. So I will have the confidence that I can trust, that I can trust that you will ship, right? And then obviously, there will always need to be someone who handles the business piece from, recruiting to, having an office that is still needed, to payroll, to fundraising. All of this, you want to have covered. So the way we think about it here is really, there will always be spikes in teams, right? Some teams are extremely technical and they're missing a bit of the business knowledge. Some teams are very strong on product, maybe slightly weaker on engineering, another spike in business, etc. I think what we are looking for is no glaring holes as it matches to the plan that you have outlined for us. And that is, that would be a strong detector. Like in an accelerator setting, as an example, when you pitch to us and then, Lucas and Carlos and I, we kind of step away and we think internally, often the conversation is, oh man, I love what they're doing, but I'm not sure they are the right team to execute against it. So use this team slide to really show, where have you been in the past? How have the experiences that you had in the past shaped you to be able to deliver on, the product or business side? Why are you the right designer to do this? So, put all the logos on there, tell your story, and shield your team, and also shield your team of advisors when you're really early stage.
Ruben, can I interrupt you very quickly, because we have
Yes.
a question and it's an interesting question. So the question is, how do we address this if it's a solo founder?
Yeah, okay. So that is that's actually a fascinating piece. I think within the VC community, there was a huge stigma around solo founders a couple of years ago. I think this has changed. I think this really has changed. In the Web3 world, we have seen a number of really successful solo founders. And I think what you want to do from a pitch perspective is you want to so you want to show that you can build a team around you, right? So solo founders does not mean solo builder, right? So founder is somewhat of a technical term, right? Like you're saying, okay, I have taken an outside risk. So I am someone who is entitled to a certain share of equity. Hence, I'm calling myself a founder, and everyone else who comes after me is basically L1, part of the management team or early employee or whatnot. What you want to show is, what is your routes to coverage, right? Like, do you have a strong product manager in mind, right? You can, so on the team slide is not necessarily just limited to the founding team, right? Talk about the third parties that you are employing to help you with building, right? If any, right? Like maybe you have a design agency, maybe you have, I don't know, but show how you cover what needs to be done. I don't advise against being a solo founder. I guess I advise against going all the way to your vision state alone. I think personally that's not as much fun. I personally very much think, and you can see it on my Twitter profile, that building software with friends is one of the coolest things that you can do. Like, get great people involved. You don't know what you don't know. People like your team will teach you stuff, not just on a business level, but also on a personal level. So craft the story of how you will hire people, where you will hire people, and how you will kind of complement the team. I don't think there's any one person that really has that type of personality where they are stellar engineer, also product, also business, and has more than 24 hours in the day to deliver against all of that. That's just a recipe for burnout.
I would just, I agree with that. I would just add to that by default, I tend not to invest in solo founders because of some of the things that you mentioned, but also building a startup is a marathon, and having the people around you that you can talk to openly and will support you during that marathon and pick you up when you fall down. That's really important. It's not just the skill sets and it's just the time, it's also the support. There are exceptions and there are some amazing solo founders, but I would surround myself with people that I trust and that I love to work with. We have another question. So in Web3, the most notable projects do not seem to have a business team. How do you convince the audience that eventually the engineers with the community will figure out the business part? And the follow-up question to that is, what was Bitcoin's business team?
Yeah, that is very interesting. So I don't know about the internals of the Bitcoin business team. I think Bitcoin is, I can geek out about this, forever. But Bitcoin is a very kind of particular case. Like, you can look at it as a case study, as like the archetype of the store of value blockchain. I personally meddle more in the dApp space, and the dApp space nearly always has some sort of at least strategic partnership or user acquisition component that ideally you outsource to a business function. You can, like, don't get me wrong, you can do it yourself. Like, just like Carlos said, you can do it yourself, but you have to appreciate, using Carlos's words, that you have to do it yourself forever, right? Because we are building these protocols, these like slot machines, to be around for a really, really long time. And I don't think you're necessarily setting yourself up for success here. However, there's also a different story whereby, you are the creator, you're an engineer, you're a developer, you are creating, in offering, and you are starting to build out your engineering team. And naturally, what you often see is that the founder that has been initially been coding a lot and been developing a lot, then more and more takes on managerial roles and kind of slowly graduates into a more management businessy type role, just because he or she ultimately becomes more and more of a decision maker and less of an individual contributor. And how do you instill trust that this person can grow into this? I think the best thing is past experience. So if we see that you have started out as like a stellar senior engineer, or just an engineer, graduated towards stellar engineer, became a product manager, or even like an engineering manager, head of engineering type. Obviously, we, at a great shop, let's say you've been at Apple or Google or wherever, obviously, or at Balancer, MakerDAO, whatever, obviously this instills a lot of confidence in us that, while as you are right now a solo founder and you have kind of not regressed, but you're back now on the individual contributor level, you can then, grow back into this kind of managerial business role. But still, like, even interacting with us as investors, right? Like, we want stakeholder management, right? We want you to own your cap table. These are kind of businessy type functions. And the question is, do you want to assume this opportunity cost, right? Do you get the best return of investment always swapping, mentally between writing excellent code here, then doing a bit of stakeholder management, then doing a bit of like payroll issues and like dealing with lawyers and jurisdiction? Do you want that, right? And I think, nobody in this room can build a pencil. Nobody here can build a pencil. A pencil is the sum of coordinated efforts of people. Do not underestimate the power of coordination, and focus on building a great team. Don't focus on how can I stay solo. I think that's, to me at least, and I agree with Carlos, that's not a winning formula. Cool. More questions?
I think we're running a little bit over time, so I think we'll move on. And if there are any questions at the end, we can probably pass them on to you, and you can answer asynchronously. Sounds good?
Excellent. Thank you. Hey guys, it was a pleasure being here with you. Feel free to find me on Twitter. Feel free to find me on the PL Slack. And yeah, it's been my pleasure. Always fun geeking out about stuff.